Hey everyone, hope you're well. Welcome back to the 2016 Bass Camp here at Warwick in Germany. We have to give a very special thank you to Michell for stepping in
Thanks
and
for
helping us out this week. So tell us a bit about this week. How's it been for you in your classes and what have you been covering?
It's been great. It's an honor to teach here. Even just to come here as an artist is an amazing opportunity in itself. So I was coming anyway, and this made it a little extra special to come teach. So I've been working on a little bit of things on the creative side, how to use modern techniques creatively, and things like tapping, harmonics, and chords, and how to actually incorporate those into your playing in an organic way, because a lot of times bass players will learn a new technique and kind of shelve it as a technique. So I'm kind of making the students think a little bit how to bring them into their playing. Add a little bit of creativity on that at the end, thinking about how to write bass lines and how to really listen and analyze a composition and think about what you can add as a bass player. And they've been super receptive and had a lot of fun. I got a lot of students playing and thinking outside the box and learning some things they might not have known otherwise. So I'm super excited to bring that element to the curriculum with all the professors, and of course it's an honor to be here. So.
And for those that don't know, you have a great website, right? The lowenduniversity.com?
Yes, I run a website called lowenduniversity.com. It's a membership lessons website where you can learn 40 to 50 hours of content from me. I add new content every week, and it's pretty much my baby right now, my full-time thing. So that's got every program and method I could possibly conjure from within. So if you want to learn more from me, you can visit me at lowenduniversity.com.
But going back to some of those concepts that you've been covering in class, I mean, how do you address techniques like tapping, which are quite advanced? And a lot of guys I see try and kind of impose that on the music just because it's something they've been working on, or they may have a lick they're desperate to use when the music doesn't always call for that lick or that technique. How do you kind of get that balance?
Well, a lot of people think, like you said, tapping, harmonics, and chords, they can be more on the advanced side, and they view those techniques as sort of something on the flashy side of technique playing. And a lot of the ways I'm teaching them to incorporate it is very subtle. If I were to play just a 3-note sort of tapping sequence, and I've used this one in the class, if I were to sort of go back and forth on that, I would not be able to play that with fingerstyle without it sounding. So it allows you to just achieve a sort of position and pattern that you wouldn't be able to achieve otherwise. And that's a very subtle way to use it. Maybe you're sustaining a whole note in D major. You just want to add that little extra to create a chord. So that's exactly how I would do that. And same with harmonics. I'm always having a bass note present. Maybe it's an E minor chord. And I can just sort of have a bass note already present and just think about, there's something I can add on top of this. And like I've been telling the students, the electric bass in its modern form is very young compared to lots of other instruments. So I still think we're seeing the evolution of how the bass can be on the forefront of being a melodic figure in a composition. It doesn't always have to be piano, guitar, whatever. The bass is obviously a support instrument, which is why I started playing this. But every now and then the composition might allow for it to have a different texture, timbre, so that's sort of the point I'm driving home with my students. Just more tools in the toolbox, as I've been telling them. So.
And can we talk about when you started playing? How did that come around?
I started playing bass much later than other instruments. I started probably when I was 14, 13. I played a little guitar like everyone else has, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't really have anything serious with it. Knew a few chords. But I started playing piano at age 5. My mom forced me into piano lessons, and I went kicking and screaming. Didn't want to do piano. It was not the cool thing to do. And as soon as I got in a few lessons, I was hooked, you know. I really got the music bug. And you fast forward a few later, I started playing trumpet in the high school, college marching bands, and that was a lot of work ethic, and of course learned a lot about reading rhythms. Trumpet has at times very syncopated horn lines and type of things we played. So, you know, the melodic, big picture background of piano mixed with sort of the very rhythmic side of trumpet and quick thinking really kind of set me up to play bass, I feel like. And of course, those are still things I'm working on, but as soon as I landed on bass, it felt very right. Well, I first started playing the bass a little later than some of the other instruments I played. I started when I was just got into high school, just got into rock and metal, got into Metallica, wanted to play bass. Right. So I got my first bass at a pawn shop for $75. Still have it today. And you know, all of that kind of, the path was laid for that because of my earlier instruments I played. You know, those instruments are great. I still play them today, but bass is really what felt home to me, and I've sort of tried to take the baton and run with it. So that's sort of where I came and where I'm at now.
And who was kind of the hero for you when you started playing? You mentioned Metallica there.
I got into Metallica. You know, it's metal bass playing, so it's a little more behind the guitar parts, but there was still an intensity to that I really liked. But even before that, I was really into Motown, funk, jazz. Yeah. You know, all the classic guys that everyone knows, I was super into them just as much. And really what got me playing bass, I should also mention, is that I just listened to the oldies station, you know, 60s, 70s growing up. And I kept hearing the song, I felt like every few weeks. It was I Want You Back, Jackson 5. Right. And there was nobody else in the song playing that bass line by any stretch. It had its own independent voice. And I was like, man, if that bass line weren't there, this song would be really different. And something spoke to me about that. It was just like the bass can really come in and change the composition entirely. And it can have its own melody, its own voice, but still glue everything together. And there was just something about that I wanted to be a part of. And I talk a lot about that in my class too, like how can the bass add to the song, and can you change it up in verse 1 and verse 2 to create different feels? And we just have this incredible liberation as far as creativity goes. So all of that really made me want to really pick up the bass and have that same freedom that these other guys were. I was so inspired, started with that, and then I got into Metallica and then Rush, which I don't even need to introduce, Geddy Lee's bass playing, and just the sheer creativity behind it and how it really drives all of their songs. So hearing that all at once, I really got into it, and you know, still learning from those same things today. They're really inspiring.
And what was the next step for you after that, after getting your bass and getting to grips with it?
You know, right around the time I got my first bass, my high school jazz band was kind of coming together. Our director hadn't really had a jazz program, right, maybe in a few years, I don't quite know, but he said, I'm going to try to rekindle this jazz program. We need a bass player. And I had just gotten my bass, and I was super shy. I didn't really know the notes or anything, so I jumped in and said, I'll do it. And sheet music was put in front of me, and I was like, oh boy, you know, I can read treble clef. I did piano and trumpet, but it's just different when it's bass clef. It's like an extra step. So I took lessons to read that. And for the next 8 years, fast forward, I played in the high school jazz ensemble for 4 years, and then another 4 years in the college university jazz ensemble. And I kid you not, you know, I owe more to those 8 years of jazz playing than hardly anything else. I mean, learning to read music, think on your toes, improvise, you know, play over non-ideal chord progressions. The soloist takes an extra ride. It's just very on your toes thinking. And I feel like that prepared me for just playing in bands and live playing in general. So I got a lot of foundation skills from doing that. In addition to that, I wanted to start my own band like everyone else does with a guitar and a bass. So I started a band called Tetrafusion. It was with some friends. We were all really musical nerd guys, music theory, and just we're into Dream Theater and Rush, Metallica. So we were just super inspired by that type of music. And we put out a couple albums, you know, one in 2009, 2010, 2012. And that was my real first taste at feeling around in the dark to write music and think more creatively. And I also played in some cover bands locally. My parents have a cover band. They've been doing it for 15 years. They play a lot of weddings, and I also play horn with them all the time. So I'm keeping as busy as I can musically when I'm at home. But that's really how bass started for me. It was a mixture of jazz, it was a mixture of rock and metal, being original, and just, you know, sticking my hands in lots of different pies and getting a feel for it. So.
And from your class I caught a bit earlier on today, it seems like you're not afraid to play things that aren't necessarily the typical bass lines. I mean, you were talking about finding the space within the track, whether that's at the lower frequencies or the top or even in the middle.
Right.
Do you ever struggle with that in terms of people have kind of pigeonholed where they want the bass, but you want to be more creative with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm just really, as a teacher here at the camp, I'm really just trying to get students to think. And one thing I tell them is having a creative outlet and being a creative player is just about having options. When I kind of remember back when I first started playing, I didn't quite know a lot about music or theory or even the fretboard. I always felt like I was stuck playing the same bass lines over and over, and I felt it was due to nothing else because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have very many options. And the more you know, the more you know. The more options you have. And I always felt I was in this place of, I wish I had more options I could choose from to be a creative bass player or improvise. Or when I go take a solo, I'm always playing the same things. It's like you just need more options to choose from. So I talk a lot about that in my class. It's always better to have more options and not need them rather than to have no options and really wish you did.
Sure, yeah.
So that's sort of my whole mentality. All these things I'm talking about, tapping, harmonics, it's just another tool in the toolbox. I've reiterated that to my students a lot, and it's really got them to think that there can be other answers just besides playing a whole note. And believe me, that's why I got into playing bass. I will always play a whole note and be a complete support instrument. And that is always my first choice. But I like it, I like the option of having a lot of other different things, the bass being something that's really evolving and having more of a melodic forefront. It's a very fun thing to explore. And some people are into it and some people aren't, but either way, it's becoming a lot more popular and accepted, So that's just kind of something I feel like I try to be on the forefront of and keep exploring the potential of the bass. It can go very far.
And talking of being on the forefront of the bass, you're now playing a 6-string.
Yes.
As you mentioned earlier on, the bass has come a long way in the last 50, 60 years.
Exactly. We started off with upright acoustic bass, which I still don't have hardly any experience playing, when I would love to do that someday. But you've just seen them evolve, and they've gone from very traditional instruments to things like this, which is a complete work of art.
Right.
And 6 strings, as you said. So now there's 7, 8, 9-string basses, which are a little much for me, but if it allows you to create the music you want to create, who's to tell you that's wrong? So it's all about being open-minded for me, and really, again, seeing how the bass can grow. And I've really enjoyed having a 6-string because it's another option. If I want the low B string, if I want the high C string, it's there. I don't have to use it. If I want it, it's there. I'm still playing these middle 4 strings, so that's kind of my philosophy.
Do you ever feel like you have a hard time when you maybe a band leader or producer sees you pull out the 6-string? Just getting them to realize that the 4 strings they're used to are still there,
You're exactly right. It's happened before. I've shown up to gigs or things, and they're like, well, a 5-string would be fine. I'm like, I've got the 5 strings still.
Yeah.
And I'm not snarky about it or anything. I understand that it's less traditional than what they're used to. But over time, it will become more accepted and more common. I feel like I see more 6-string basses now than ever. And again, I really rarely use the top string in my own playing. Maybe if I'm just playing around or noodling, but if I'm really writing music or doing cover gigs, I don't ever use it. But every now and then I might need it. It's about having that option, so that's why I like having it.
And can you tell us about this bass? This bass looks great.
Yeah, so this is a custom shop Warwick thumb bass, and before I even started playing Warwick, I knew I wanted to play Warwick. I've known about their instruments for a very long time. When I first started playing bass, I was really into researching brands and just seeing what's out there, and these just caught my eye. And funnily enough, the original bass player for my parents' cover band had a Warwick, way long. I think it was a Fortress model.
Right, okay.
And the aesthetics of it just stuck in my mind. I was like, I want to play that. I got to find it. And of course, here I am. I've come to find it, and I like it exactly as much as I thought I would. So this is a Warwick thumb bass, a custom shop, 6-string, of course, and it's just a California Buckeye burl top, 26 frets, which is standard on the thumb basses, and Wingay neck, mahogany back. And it is an instrument I have come to absolutely love. The thumb basses, even as a stock model, are amazing. I also own one, and I played that before this one. I've just really come to love the feel, the sound, everything about these basses. So that's the gist of it. And I got a few bells and whistles, the lights, of course, even up to here, and everything else is pretty standard. EMG pickups, and that's about the gist of it. So.
How important is it to have a bass, a one bass, that, you know, a go-to instrument, especially with you're playing a 6-string, that you can kind of hammer it and then forget about it? Do you know what I mean?
Right. You know, just as far as having one instrument that's really close to you, I'm always about the mentality that the instrument should never get in the way of what you're trying to do. If there's some sort of physical aspect or something uncomfortable about it, that is a distraction to the music you want to create. It's going to hold you up. It's not going to let you be the musician. So, you know, a lot of people play 8, 9, 10 different basses. They're always pulling different ones out, and I envy a collection like that. But at the same time, I like sticking with one if I can, because you really develop a relationship with your instrument, just simply from a muscle memory, comfort, and you're more creative and inspired when you're comfortable. You know, if somebody handed me a bass off the wall, I could play on it, but it wouldn't feel like home. It's still a great instrument. These are all amazing instruments, but there's something special about the one that you're used to playing that just doesn't get in the way of what you're trying to do as a musician. So I've really tried to use this one for everything. I've learned to create, you know, tap-in chords, harmonics, those type of techniques, how to get them to all sound the way I want, just all from in-house, you know. So it's a very important factor. I totally agree.
And what's coming up next for you? What should we look out for?
I have nothing coming up this year. The last thing I had on the calendar was this Warwick camp. And of course it's a little extra awesome that I was able to come and teach and sort of bring my teaching, which has been stateside of course, but online and interactive, to a classroom camp setting. And I already knew how awesome this camp was, so just to be a little more involved was really a dream come true. And I want to really thank Hans-Peter and Ove for you know, inviting me to do this. So it's been an honor, and they don't quite know how much I appreciate the opportunity. So this was the last thing for me, and then once I get back, I'm continuing work on my lowenuniversity.com website, which is a full-time endeavor in itself, and have a lot of fun with that. So I will continue teaching until my next gig or tour comes up. You never know when that might be all the time, so that's what I'll be focusing on. So.
All right, man. Well, thanks again for coming over. We really appreciate you having you here. So
thanks for having me, man.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoy the rest of the week.
All right.
Thanks again, Mike.
All right.
All
Thanks
right, guys. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.
Thanks.